Violent leftists just vandalized Ben Carson's home. However, his response absolutely powerful, putting them all to shame. Lindsay Bruce for Liberty Writers News reports that the liberal media, they want to ignore the extreme hate and violence that's coming from the left, but it's growing stronger, and they're claiming new victims every single day. The latest victim is our own Secretary of Urban Development, Ben Carson. His home, this is Ben Carson's Virginia home, nice looking place there, vandalized on Wednesday with hateful rhetoric about President Trump. They state here, quote, more recently our home in Virginia, along with that of a neighbor, was vandalized by people who also wrote hateful rhetoric about President Trump. He said in a Facebook post, he said, we were out of town, but other kind, embarrassed neighbors cleaned up most of the mess before we returned. They say here the vandalism was a response to what happened in Charlottesville on Saturday. Yeah, so Ben Carson, yeah, from the looks of it, I think he is a person of color. I can't tell. Yeah, maybe he is. So I guess even people of color are attacked with by the bigoted, hateful, racist left. Right? Why? Because he supports President Trump? Yeah. I guess anyone is in their crosshairs in the alt left if you support Trump. Now Carson, he didn't lash out and name call like so many liberals have done this week at least. Instead, he decided to share a story, and this is how he shamed him. He posted that he said, this is a direct quote from him. He said, several years ago, we bought a farm in rural Maryland. One of the neighbors immediately put up a Confederate flag. And then he says, a friend of ours who's an African-American 3-star general was coming to visit and immediately turned around concluding that he was in the wrong place. He continues his post. He says, interestingly, all the other neighbors immediately put up American flags shaming the other neighbor who took down the Confederate flag. He said, in both instances, less than kind behavior was met by people taking the high road. We could all learn from these examples. So Ben Carson's message is going viral now, and it's going viral for good reason, because we all need to unite now more than ever. Like President Trump said, there is hatred on all sides. Unless we have to get through this. We have to pierce this evil. Because, as President Trump said, we are all Americans first. So comment below, subscribe for updates. If you like what we're doing, give us a...
President Trump set to return to the White House tonight ahead of a trip to Arizona on Tuesday. He's expected to visit the border town of Yuma before holding a campaign-style rally in Phoenix. Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake is a vocal Trump critic. But as the president starts his first full week without Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, other GOP lawmakers are criticizing his response still to Charlottesville. Joining me right now, former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, a Fox News contributor and former GOP presidential candidate. Good to see you, Governor. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria. Great to be with you.
Let's start with Steve Bannon's removal from the White House. The president begins this new week without that counsel and that strategist. And, of course, we want to get into the South Korean missile exercises tomorrow, the military exercises, rather, as well as Tuesday's rally. What's your sense of how things change this upcoming week?
Well, I think when Steve Bannon left, I have it on good authority that as he was leaving the White House, he was screaming, free at last, free at last. Look, I think Steve Bannon is going to be much happier outside the confines of all of the restrictions of government. He's gone back to Breitbart. He's going to be free to continue to speak very clearly about the kind of American populism that, frankly, had a lot to do with Donald Trump being elected president. And I think Steve Bannon is going to be much more effective outside the White House, outside the walls of government, than he was inside the walls of government. Yeah,
the president obviously has had one of his toughest weeks so far this past week, Governor, from the reaction to his response to Charlottesville, to the CEOs stepping down and forcing the president to disband all of those councils, to look, Missouri senator calling for his assassination, which is completely outrageous, and she's not getting any pushback on it. It's just a slap on the wrist. How does he change? Does he need to pivot, Governor, in the face of all of this pushback?
The tough part for him is he's got to realize it's not going to get better. The press hate him. The Democrats hate him. They want to get rid of him. And sadly, there are a lot of Republicans who hate him and are trying to get rid of him. So all Donald Trump really has, he's got two basic, really strong support groups. One, he has the faith community. I want you to notice that in all of this last week, there was only one person from his faith council that decided to leave. Everybody else is staying put. That's a key part of his constituency. Secondly, he's got a lot of people, working men and women across the country in rural America, middle America, who they're not stupid. They see what's happening. This is an attempt to discredit and ultimately dislodge Donald Trump from the White House. And they realize that so much of the so-called outrage is manufactured, and it's manufactured to give them something to talk about. Let me give an example. There was more talk about Steve Bannon, the fact that a staff member left, and apparently it was a mutual decision between him, John Kelly, than there was about the fact that Hope Hicks became communications director. I think this is a really big story. Yeah. Hope Hicks is probably one of the best people Donald Trump has around him. This was a brilliant move. She's now the new comm director. Great move by the president, somebody who is loyal, faithful, and it's never about her. You never see her jumping in front of a camera or trying to talk to reporters on the record. I think that's significant. Yeah. Let me just say, Maria, what I would love to see Donald Trump do is to outdo his opponent. So let me give an example. When they're calling for the destruction of the statues, I would suggest Donald Trump, instead of trying to beat them, join them and say, you know what, maybe we should do that. And here's what we should also do. Let's call upon Democrats to never again have a Jefferson-Jackson dinner. And when they do, I hope that every African-American boycotts a dinner that celebrates slave owners. Let's make the Democrats eat the fact that it was Democrats who built those statues. It was Democrats who fought racial equality all the way up through the 60s. Let's make them remember their history and the statues that they built for the racists that were the ones who stood at schoolhouse doors across the South and said to African Americans, you can't come in these school doors.
Well, I think you make a great point, Governor, but the fact is unfortunately, this is not just an argument back and forth. This is going to impact business. This is going to impact the business of the American people. I mean, what I'm told right now by insiders is that the Democrats are going to put this new amendment in every bill. So in other words, it's going to mess around with the appropriations process. Even though they may not vote on every final bill, they're going to have a motion to include an amendment, and that amendment is going to be, we need money to take down the Confederate statues. I don't know the answer to this in terms of taking down all of these statues. I don't know that you want to wipe away America's history. You want a reminder of who this country was and is today so that this country never goes back to such a horrific moment in time. Having said that, what's your take on how this busts up the agenda? Tax reform, perhaps another health care bill that seems to be still out there. Is it going to mess up the appropriations process where, once again, the people are the losers because the voters, the American people, do not get to see their tax reform, which is what they want?
If they don't get these things, it's not because of the Democrats. It's because of a bunch of wuss Republicans who will not stand up to the pressure and who will not do what they promised to do. The reason we don't have a repeal and replace is because the Republicans blew it.
That's right.
And you know, with all due respect to Mitch McConnell, when he says, well, the president had excessive expectations. No, he didn't. He just expected that if you had a majority in the House and the Senate and the White House, as has been promised for 7.5 years by the Republicans, give us all of these things and we'll get this done. And then they can't get it done. Look, the reason we don't have tax reform is because of Republicans. The reason we haven't defunded Planned Parenthood is because of Republicans. And here's one that now Republicans have a good reason to do. They could say we've got to defund Planned Parenthood because it was started by one of the most outrageous racist of all time, Margaret Sanger, who was a vowed racist and who believed in eugenics and said the most horrible things about African-American people. That's a good reason to do it. Why don't they do that? My gosh, if Jeff Flake and people like him would spend half as much time helping this president build a country rather than trying to sell his book, my gosh, we'd have this agenda well underway.
That's a really good point. Governor, what do you think John Kelly has done to change the situation or improve things for the president? You know, a couple of weeks ago when General Kelly was first put in as his chief of staff, we all thought, well, he's going to put discipline and a new structure in the White House for the president, keep him sticking on message, because it feels like the president gets thrown off so easily. We know what the left is trying to do to him and to his administration. That's not stopping anytime soon. But to just react to every tweet, Lindsey Graham criticizes him, he's got to come back with a tweet criticizing Lindsey Graham, instead of focused on the issues that matter to the American people, tax reform, getting a health care bill passed. Do you think that's still alive, tax reform, or at least tax cuts by year end?
Well, if it didn't, the Republicans deserve to lose in the midterm, and a lot of these guys need to go ahead and resign and just say, we're too weak to get it done. You've got the numbers, you've got the majority, you've got a president that wants to do it and will sign the bill when it gets to his desk. For gosh sake, put it on his desk and quit worrying about the distractions. And so what if Donald Trump tweets some things? There's some things I wish maybe he wouldn't distract his own message. Right. There are some battles he gets into I wish he wouldn't. But the fact is, he's president. He has an agenda. It's an agenda that will bring real jobs, real growth to America, which, by the way, we're already seeing even in advance of it, just in anticipation. The stock market's exploded. Right. Jobs at a 17-year high. There's some good things going on out there, Maria. The media is missing most of them. Yeah,
so bottom line, Governor, do you think this new debate, which is probably taking place of the Russia probe, right? I mean, the Russia probe didn't go anywhere for the Dems, so now they're all outraged over the Confederate statues. Is that going to mess with the appropriations process and impact the potential for tax cuts?
Not if the Republicans have enough spine to just tell the Democrats we're not playing that silly game. Yeah. I mean, for a while it was the Russians who elected Donald Trump. Now they say it's the racists who elected Donald Trump. They don't even know themselves that it was the American people who elected Donald Trump.
Let's face it, you know, Bob Corker was very critical of President Trump this past week. I don't know. Some people think Bob Corker is a Democrat. I mean, he ran as a Republican, but I don't know. He doesn't act it. A lot of people wonder what his stance was on the whole Russia situation a couple of months ago, and now the criticism of the president. I mean, all of these so-called Republicans or Democrats wearing Republican clothes, there are quite a few of them in Congress.
Well, there are, and that's why I say either get your job done or go home. It's time to go big or go home. And a lot of these guys, it's almost like I want to say to them, how do you think this would be for you right now if Hillary were your president? How much fun would you be having? And I think a lot of them would be having fun because all they got to do is criticize. They're not then responsible for getting results. But we didn't send them there to make speeches. We sent them there to make America great again, to borrow a phrase from someone I know. Yeah. Why don't they do it? This is why they're there.
It's going to be quite the midterm elections next year, 2018. Wow. A lot on the table, Governor. Good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
You bet, Maria. Thank you.
Governor Mike Huckabee joining us there.